God bless you. Today we are in 2 Kings in the New Jerusalem Holy Bible, and we are in section C, Some Miracles of Elisha, the Widow's Oil, chapter 4. The wife of a member of the Prophetic Brotherhood appealed to Elisha. "Your servant, my husband, is dead," she said, "and you know how your servant revered Yahweh. A creditor has now come to take my 2 children and make them his slaves." Elijah said, "What can I do for you? Tell me, what have you got in the house?" "Your servant has nothing in the house," she replied, "except a flask of oil." He said, "Go outside and borrow jars from all your neighbors, empty jars, and not too few. Get a lot of them. When you come back, shut the door on yourself and your sons, and pour the oil into all these jars, putting each aside when it is full." So she left him, and she shut the door on herself and her sons. They passed her the jars, and she went on pouring. When the jars were full, she said to her son, "Pass me another jar." "There were no more," he replied. Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, who said, "Go and sell the oil and redeem your pledge. You and your children can live on the remainder." That's so cool. Oh, wow. The women of Shunem and her son. Shunem? I think it's Shunem. One day, as Elisha was on his way to Shunem, a woman of rank who lived there pressed him to stay and eat there. After this, he always broke his journey for a meal when he passed that way. She said to her husband, "Look, I am sure the man who is constantly passing our way must be a holy man of God. Let us build him a small walled room, and put him a bed in it, and a table and a chair and a lamp. Whenever he comes to us, he can rest there." One day when he came, he retired to the upper room and lay down. He said to his servant Gehazi, "Call our Shunammite." He called her, and when she appeared, Elijah said, "Tell her this. Look, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What can we do for you? Is there anything you would like said for you to the king or to the commander of this army?" She replied, "I live with my own people about me. What can I do for you then?" he asked. And Gehazi replied, "Well, she has no son, for her husband is old." Elijah said, "Call her." The servant called her, and she stood at the door. "This time next year," he said, "you will hold a son in your arms." But she said, "No, my lord, do not deceive your servant." But the woman did conceive, and she gave birth to a son at the time that Elijah had said she would. The child grew up. One day he went to his father, who was with the reapers, and exclaimed to his father, "Oh, my head, my head!" The father told the servant to carry him to his mother. He lifted him up and took him to his mother, and the boy lay on her lap until midday, when he died. She went upstairs and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door on him, and went out. She called her husband and said, "Send me one of the servants with a donkey. I must hurry to the man of God and back." "Why go to him today?" he asked. It is not new moon or Sabbath." But she replied, "Never mind." She had the donkey saddled and said to her servant, "Lead on, go. Do not draw rein until I give the order." She set off and made her way to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her coming in the distance, he said to his servants, servant Gehazi, "Look, here comes our Shunammite. Now run and meet her and ask her, 'Are you well? Is your husband well? Your child well?' 'Yes,' she replied. When she came to the man of God there on the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi stepped forward to push her away, but the man of God said, 'Leave her. Here is bitterness in her soul, and Yahweh has hidden it from me. He has not told me.' She said, 'Did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, don't deceive me?' Elijah said to Gehazi, 'Hitch up your clothes. Take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. If anyone greets you, do not answer him. You are to stretch out my staff over the child.' But the child's mother said, 'As Yahweh lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you.' Then he stood up and followed her. Gehazi had gone ahead of them and had stretched out the staff over the child, but there was no sound or response. He went back to meet Elisha and told him. 'The child has not woken up,' he said. Elisha then went to the house, and there on the bed lay the child, dead. He went in and shut the door on the two of them and prayed to Yahweh. Then he climbed onto the bed and stretched himself on the top of the child, putting his mouth on his mouth, his eyes to his eyes, and his hands to his hands. And as he lowered himself onto him, the child's flesh grew warm. Then he got up and walked to and fro inside the house, and then climbed onto the bed again and lowered himself onto the child 7 times in all. Then the child sneezed and opened his eyes. He then summoned Gehazi. 'Call our Shunammite,' he said. He called her. When she came in, he said, 'Pick up your son.' She went in and falling at his feet, prostrated herself on the floor, and then picked up her son and went out. The poisoned soup. Elisha went back to Gilgal while there was famine in the country. As the Brotherhood of prophets were sitting with him, he said to his servants, 'Put the large pot on the fire and come and cook some soup for the Brotherhood.' One of them went into the fields to gather herbs and came on some wild vine, off which he gathered enough gourds to fill his lap. On his return he cut them up into the pot of soup. They did not know what they were. They then poured the soup out for the men to eat. But they had no sooner tasted the soup than they cried, 'Man of God, there is death in the pot!' And they could not eat it. 'Bring some meal then,' Elisha said. This he threw into the pot and said, 'Pour out for the company to eat.' And there was nothing harmful in the pot. The multiplication of loaves. A man came from Baal Salisha, bringing the man of God bread from the first fruits, 20 barley loaves and fresh grain still in the husk. 'Give it to the company to eat,' Elisha said. But his servant replied, 'How can I serve this to 100 men?' 'Give it to the company to eat,' he insisted. 'For Yahweh says, they will eat and have some left over.' He served them. They ate and had some left over, as Yahweh had said. Reminds me of the fishes and the loaves, does it you? Oh my goodness. Naaman is healed. Chapter 5. Naaman, army commander to the king of Aram, was a man who enjoyed his master's respect and favor, since through him Yahweh had granted victory to the Arameans. But the man suffered from a virulent skin disease. Now, on one of their raids into Israelite territory, the Arameans had carried off a little girl, who became a servant of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would approach the prophet of Samaria, he would cure him of his skin disease." Naaman went and told his master. "This and this," he reported, "is what the girl from Israel has said." "Go by all means," said the king of Aram. "I shall send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 festal robes. He presented the letter to the king of Israel. It read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you for you to cure him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes. "Am I a god to give death and life," he said, "for him to send a man to me and ask me to cure him of his skin disease? Listen to this and take note of it, and see how he intends to pick a quarrel with me." When Elisha heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent word to the king, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, and he will find there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his team and chariot and drew up at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent him a messenger to say, "Go and bathe 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will become clean once more." But Naaman was indignant and went off, saying, "Here was I, thinking he would be sure to come out to me, and stand there, and call on the name of Yahweh his God, and wave his hand over the spot, and cure the part that was diseased. Surely Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, are better than any water in Israel. Could I not bathe in them and become clean?" And he turned round and went off in a rage. But his servants approached him and said, "Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? All the more reason then when he says to you, 'Bathe, and you will become clean.'" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, as Elisha had told him to do, and his flesh became clean once more, like the flesh of a little child. Returning to Elisha with his whole escort, he went in and, presenting himself, said, "Now I know that there is no God anywhere on earth except in Israel. Now please accept a present from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As Yahweh lives, whom I serve, I will accept nothing." Naaman pressed him to accept, but he refused. Then Naaman said, "Since your answer is no, allow your servant to be given as much earth as 2 mules may carry, since your servants will no longer make burnt offerings or sacrifice to any god except Yahweh. Only, and may Yahweh forgive your servant for this. When my master goes to the temple of Rimmon to worship there, he leans on my arm, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon when he does. May Yahweh forgive your servant for doing this." "Go in peace," Elisha said. Naaman had gone a small distance when Gehazi, Elisha's servant, said to himself, "My master has let this Aramean Naaman off lightly, but not accepting what he offered. As Yahweh lives, I will run after him and get something out of him." So Gehazi set off in pursuit of Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he jumped down from his chariot to meet him. "Is all well?" he asked. "All is well," he said. "My master has sent me to say, this very moment 2 young men of the Prophetic Brotherhood have arrived from the highlands of Ephraim. Be kind enough to give them a talent of silver and 2 festival robes." "Please accept 2 talents," Naaman replied, and pressed him. Tying up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with the 2 festal robes, and consigning them to 2 of his servants who carried them ahead of Gehazi. When he reached Ophel, He took these from them and put them away in the house. He then dismissed the men who went away. He, for his part, went and presented himself to his master. Elisha said, "Gehazi, where have you been?" "Your servant has not been anywhere," he replied. But Elijah said to him, "Was not my heart present there when someone left his chariot to meet you? Now you have taken the money. You can buy gardens with it, and olive groves, sheep and oxen, male and female slaves. But Naaman's disease of the skin will cling to you and your descendants forever." And Gehazi left his presence, white as snow from skin disease. He got greedy. It's never good to be greedy. And he didn't think that Elisha would know what he had done. He hid those bags of money and those robes in the house. But Elisha knew, just like God knows when we do something bad. He's always seeing us and watching us, and his angels are taking notes back to him. And as always, I love you.